Hello everybody and welcome to H561. We have currently a nice sunny day here, not too warm, like 15-16 degrees, but under the sun we still get a nice little tan. I can feel my skin stretch a bit. I think I'll have to use sunglasses. And I will continue the previous lecture where I talked about my intuition of implicit and explicit and how this has become an incredibly good tool for me to deepen the understanding of what quantum physics is. I would say even an invaluable tool, and that this tool can actually be the opening to get concepts that are pretty much understandable for the everyday man. We are approaching the layman, which is very important, and I will try to explain why it is that we do not understand what the professionals are saying when it comes to quantum physics, and why are they saying it, and in what way they are saying the things they are saying. A couple of years ago I was amazed about hearing that 60 to 70% of all papers when it comes to quantum physics is still formulated in classical physics. And I was thinking that sort of deepens the cleft between common understanding among us laymen and how it is amongst the professionals. It deepens the cleft. And I was also thinking how weird that it's not using quantum physics and that language when they even trying to explain quantum physical concepts and experiments. But I came to realize when you do something practically, you get an implicit knowledge, and of course there cannot be a real misunderstanding. In that case, there were a misunderstanding. Those papers wouldn't be published at all in classical physics and that terminology. When you are working with it, it's very easy to make two different explicit things. You can do a classical physical and you can also do a quantum physical. It wouldn't be a problem for you. And when I realized that, I realized also that there are natural causes for the lack of understanding of quantum physics among ordinary people, because the scientists stick to the methods that makes them understand each other, and in a way that's how it has to be. There are actually practical reasons behind all this, and it made me realize that their understanding, because they do something practical, is much deeper than my understanding is. And when I read something explicit, that is classical physical, I have my own implicit understanding, and it's not the practical one they have, and therefore I completely lose out on the implications of quantum physics. Yes, I know this is a bit hard to understand. It's going on different levels, but it has to do, if you do something practical, you always get the embodied knowledge. And the embodied knowledge has its clear message, even if it's not explicit. And therefore you can understand explicit messages like verbal messages, equations, mathematical explanations, without having a problem. And this is very similar to the ambigram, because internal knowledge will change how the ambigram look. Your knowledge is what you practically do as well. It's an embodiment. It's not just in the head. And we have so many times mentioned we need two things, for instance, for mathematics to work. We need the figures without a doubt, but we also need meaning, an embodiment, a hierarchy, and that is necessary to make mathematics. All the numbers cannot be of the same kind. They are different. One could even say that they are situated differently. Exactly like the cars I showed a couple of lectures ago, that they are situated differently, and therefore it's part of the properties of the car to be in a different position. And that is something you can't take apart. You can do it in a Newtonian perspective, but only in a very, very limited use, and as long as you have implicit practical understanding. Otherwise it won't do, because it simply not is reality. It's anything but reality. And this makes it a lot clearer what is a representation in the book, well, book soon, but the book that Ian McGilchrist wrote. What is a representation? I often think of a map or a symbol of something, or even a photo, but it is something different. It's hard to pinpoint, but the idea of implicit, explicit can actually help here. I'm quite certain of that. The representation is the explicit, which always needs the implicit to have meaning. But we need both of them. And it's the both of them that is the hollow movement, reality, so to speak. And this is just the same that we need to see objects as positions as well, and not separate that. As I mentioned time before, we need to see time as a digression, succession of instances, but not with time in between them as a place taker. Because the moment and where it's in time, it's together. It's not separatably. You can't separate those things. Reality will not yield for that separation. And if you try to do that, it's like you can't. Like Newton tried to explain time, which he never did, because you can't explain it. And you can't imagine it. This is almost a game of words, something unexplainable, unimaginable. So you can see a problem here. This makes a distance between reality and what we think about reality. And sadly enough, this other thing, classical physics, often wins. But it doesn't give us another reality. It just gives us less of reality. It doesn't have its own explicit or implicit. It just stops perception, thinking. It's a stop there. You stop to think. It's almost like you're stopping your car by a stop sign and not moving anymore. That's classical physics. It's lack of perception. You cannot see those things that many people witness to have seen, like distance, depth, not in the classical physical way. That's impossible. And of course, quantum physics shows that better than anything else. And of course, in the bottom is the influence from the monetary system. That's an important part of this, very important part. With the monetary system, very early developed by the Greek shipping things all over the known world, doing business. That was the Greeks' purpose, doing business, earning money, earning goods, earning luxury. And something in this area grew up, that all money is exchangeable. Well, this goes the same with all the other examples. It is exchangeable, possibly, in a thought experiment, when you only have a now. But that does not take in consideration the future or the past, nor the past. Those things are out of the picture. So actually, when I say now, I say somebody that is doesn't have enough knowledge. Somebody who's a complete layman when it comes to money. Whereas a money purchaser, somebody that works with money, he could say, or he would say, he should say, well, you should put your money in dollars, don't put them in Japanese yen, or for whatever reasons, do not ever put your money into Norwegian crowns or Finnish marks. And that has to do with the long perspective, when there is a future, when there is a past, because they are different. We can't notice that when we don't have the practical knowledge. So it's a lack of knowledge here. When I say now, I don't literally mean a now, but you can use now as a metaphor. Right now, when there's no past, when there's no future, I can say that the money are interchangeable. A little bit like I go to changing office where it says cambio, go there and I change my pounds to Brazilian escudos, something like that. But my lack of knowledge makes me think that they're all interchangeable. And it was a lack of knowledge on part of the Greek. It was the common knowledge, that's true. And it became more and more common and ingrained in the society. But it's here where it all started. And it's also in the same process. There was like a very close relative, which you can call the division between subject and object. For the first time in world history, in one unique instance, that developed in pre-Socratic Greece. And that is the idea that everything should be divided into a generalized observer and a generalized object. But that has a birth point. Things worked perfectly fine before that. And they did not begin to work better afterwards. But this thing came much later with the Industrial Revolution to get significantly more influential. And by then it had already become the unspoken assumption that from the wholeness that we had in Iliadic times, in the Trojan Wars, where they did not differentiate between subject and object, there were still potential other things that could exist in this sphere. It doesn't necessarily by any means have to be subject-object. It can be myriads of other positions, divisions. It can be a three partition, it can be a quadruple partition, like we find in Chatuskoti, and it could be like a smooth passage from subject to object. It doesn't have to be subject and object, I have to note as well. It could be three things, could be one thing. So, but something got stuck there. And it's the same thing as the stop signal. It's a stop for thinking. You can't really perceive reality to be only one division. That's a fake law. It's a fake rule. And you can only follow that rule by being unaware of alternatives. So what the common man need to be informed about is that there are alternatives. And that is usually the start of a long journey into a more liberated way of being. And for us, members of the ambiguity channel, it's our position to act as guides, help people understand that there is a better, more holistic, more widened way of perceiving, of being, of existing, bodily and corporally. And this is very close. You can make a parallel here with a person that works with money, and he has this internal implicit knowledge because he's been working with it practically in the real world, his body and all. And that gives you a unique knowledge that cannot be transferred to explicit currency. It cannot be written in a book. That won't be enough. It could be enough if you have the implicit knowledge, but explicit knowledge is never enough. It has to go by hand with implicit knowledge. But if you are working with it, you will naturally understand that money can never be completely transferred. They're not interchangeable. Never were, never will be. But it can be, and this is interesting, that the money buyer, the money guy, call him that, it could be that he can't explain what he knows. So you can't ask him what he knows. He can show you, possibly. And if you start at his money buying firm somewhere in Wall Street, he will teach and you will understand. But it doesn't mean that he can make an explanation in an explicit manner. That is something completely different. And that comes strictly afterwards. You have the knowledge. It never can come before. And the same thing we want to do, like the moneylender makes to his adept, to his pupil. We want to show people the right way, the road to greater understanding, bigger understanding, more encompassing understanding. And to do that, we need to embody the knowledge ourselves. That is very important. We need to bodily and spiritually reach a state by practice, by doing these lectures, by talking, discussing in the pods, also practicing yoga and other corporal things. Come to the understanding of the unity, but also of the division, of the implicit, that is the body, and the practical doing, and also what is explicit, what you can explain, what's explainable, what you can see, the observations. And I have a bit of a plan here in 4 parts how to do this. And remember, this is my intuitions, it's my so to speak joyous prospects to the 100 lectures that comes now, because with this new tool things will change. Not so much in the start, but they will eventually be quite different. And this is my intuitions now. But we need to have these intuitions because they're going to help us. As they're going to give us the energy we need, the joy, the anticipation, I would say. Yeah, the anticipation. We should be a little bit like a sweet bakery, having in honor displays candy, chocolates, the lure of the mind. But inside, it's not only chocolate and bakery, there's something even bigger. But we need to let people know that it is something bigger, but that need to be shown in their own terms, the classical physical terms. Otherwise, it won't be understandable because they don't have the implicit knowledge, as I mentioned before. So we need to be sort of a translator for the fuller experience of reality to classical physics. It should be in terms that are understandable with a person who has the implicit knowledge of classical physics, and not as scientists does, or even writers of books like popular science books, who try to do everything within the fields of science, but it won't work because these people don't have the implicit knowledge. You need implicit knowledge to understand Schrödinger's cat, I'd say. You need to train a bit. There is actually a world out here with real time, and knowledge takes time, like brotherhood, liberty, and other things. It takes time to develop. Now the first thing, and this is a model I got from the very nice trilogy, The Matrix, and that's a paradox that turns up within the matrix. Same cat passes 2 times, and that's a sure sign that you are in the matrix and there is a glitch somewhere. Proper reality doesn't have a glitch, but the matrix has. Whereas it would have passed a cat round the corner here, I don't think I would notice that, because I'm pretty sure I live in the real reality, and in the real reality the same cat doesn't pass 2 times. Not in that way anyway. And therefore any cat that passes out of my direct vision would be directly interpreted as different cat, as a different cat. There's no risk of me perceiving a cat passing like 5 meters from me as being the same cat. It takes a lot of effort, and I would bet you 10 pounds that even if I looked at it sternly for half a minute, I would say it was a similar cat. Would never ever say it was the same cat. That would never happen. Trust me on that one. And the reason is it's impossible. And what's impossible comes first. Everything that's impossible will be hidden from perception. Follows the rules of classical physics. Therefore, we need something like the cat. Let me put an example. I hope this is going to make it simpler. In mathematics, if you're not a complete expert and works with mathematics every day, you assume it's like the reality. Everything works in mathematics. There's no problems with it. It's only when you exaggerate, when you get into interminable numbers, that's where you get the glitch. That's where you get the deja vu experience, the cat, the glitch in reality. Therefore, paradoxes are very important as a first step, because there are sort of signals to tell the person, hey, maybe you're not living in reality. We have a glitch to show you, a paradox. And these paradoxes should be of a positive demeanor. They should not be as Zenon's paradox with the turtle and the hare that leads people in the wrong direction. That's a paradox to say that reality is wrong and we should look somewhere else. And that is actually the road some of the pre-Socratic took. And I would say today most philosophers do straddle on that road, especially British and American philosophers within the analytical philosophy, the Anglo-Saxon philosophy. No, we need good paradoxes. Douglas Hofstadter wrote a book, GEB, 3 different subjects, Gödel, Escher, Bach. All those paradoxes are very, very good as a start, a perfect start. And we can find more paradoxes because they are the ones that starts the curiosity. Something's wrong. I would like to have a look at this. That makes me interested. Just like the cat in the film Matrix. And we all know, because of the lectures we had, that quantum physicists who discover the phenomena of quantum physics all changed their routes. They got more than one deja vu experience. They got gazillions of them. More than enough to make them want to wonder, starting to wonder, made them curious, and changed their lives fundamentally. The second could always be a part of number one, but I make it a separate. And that's the thing, it is problematic not living in reality. Our perception of time, of room, space, is byproducts of Isaac Newton. He didn't like them. And they were made for a very special purpose, very limited purpose, made to construct bridges, moving vehicles, to make calculations, and therefore you need examples in the mind of Newton that is not taken for reality. I think Newton knew this. This is not real. But when he was working with it, he got an implicit knowledge what reality is. It's impossible, because he could construct things that were moving and everything. You get a feel for it. You get the knowledge. Even if you explicitly would say different, you still do have the knowledge. Because you done it practically. You've been in the world, tested it. So that, as I mentioned before, doesn't have to go hand in hand. But all the rest that read Newton and his Principia, like Voltaire, they had no idea implicitly. Well, we all know Voltaire was so unpractical he couldn't even water his horses. Somebody else had to do it. Obviously, he would not understand Newton, even if he could repeat it. Well, he could not repeat it even. He needed the help of his girlfriend. But that goes to show that how implicit and explicit helps create order in this complete confusion. And the more I try out implicit explicit, the more it helps me. It's becoming clearer and clearer. So it's actually a practical tool. The more often you use it, the better it becomes to help you understand. And therefore, I think it's so fitting to say that there is a new era coming around now with the 600th lecture. But if you're not living in reality, nothing will work out for you. The planning, so to speak, förutsägelserna that you have in classical physics won't work in real life, won't work in reality. That was a position that was taken already from the start. You constructed something unreal, and therefore it cannot work in reality. By definition, by its construction, by its inception. Initialvillkorna, if you want. We will experience problems if we uphold that model, as we do. And a lot of that problematic things we found in reality, the problems with modern day wars, First and Second World War, many other things like the climate change, the lack of understanding between people, it's obvious. Our explicit understanding cannot be the same. It's impossible. And even if it were same, the implicit knowledge would still make the understanding different. And if we take by naivety or lack of knowledge their explicit sayings to be the truth of what they're thinking, we are bound to have problems. That will start with problems, will end with conflicts, and that will end with war. No doubt, we've seen it in the last century. The most warfaring century ever. More people died in wars in the last century than any other war in the 2000 years that we've seen before. Well, in total of 2000 years, there have been less killings in wars in the last century. And that is not at all caused only by modern weaponry. There are other reasons for that. Modern wars are a hell of a lot tougher than the previous wars. But that goes to show they do not understand. I am right, they are wrong. What is it lacking? Implicit knowledge or understanding of implicit knowledge. But also on an individual level in this second part, your life won't work. You won't be able to predict outcomes in the future of what you do with classical physics, with linear time, or with empty space model. It simply cannot work. So you're bound to a lot of unnecessary mistakes, disasters even in your own life, because you took something that was never meant to be reality. You took that to use that in reality. It's a grave category mistake. But it's also lack of knowledge, and this implicit knowledge will help you understand the right way, a more wholesome way. And they learned that time is something completely different than a line that you put up different moments. That's in itself incredibly simplified, and obviously from Newton, nowhere else. It had a starting point, not coming from reality. So what does quantum physics do in your own life could be the second thing after the paradoxes. How it opens up new possibility in understanding. And here we have the whole spectra of more joyous experience, more vivid reality. And let me just mention what Ian McGilchrist mentions a lot, the boredom. The first time people start to complain about boredom is in the late 18th century. This is when classical physical time and space started to seep down into the upper classes. This is an effect of classical physics. Everything is the same. You lose more and more the connection to reality. A little bit like I mentioned in the previous episode 600, that you are a ship that has lost its connection to the shoreline. And in this desperation, you start using other measures to find land, measures that are wrong. And this is what the pre-Socratic, some of them already did, like Parmenides. Obviously, he went further in the wrong direction, and that we can do. And the Zenon's paradox was also that, in the wrong direction, to say that reality is wrong, let's live in fantasy. So we should be like people on land, showing other human beings there is land. Go in this direction, because they won't know anything. It won't be up, it won't be down, it won't be forward, it won't be backwards. Everything is a model, homogeneous, sterilized model of classical physics. Impossible to find your way out of that. So we need to be like a lighthouse, showing the way. And eventually they will find their way. They can try out dry land, or at least see it, and they will be navigating in that direction. And when time goes, they will be able to do their own process. They won't need our help anymore. But it's in this very sensitive situation, before they see land, we need to come in and help. This is quantum physics for the people, to be a lighthouse. Come here, here is more reality. Here you understand the effects of your actions. Here you're not looked up in a cave where is no way out to understand more things. Here you will start to develop instead of being at the stop sign, going nowhere. Because all the thinking of the philosophers after the pre-Socratic was a standstill. It was a stagnate world. And specifically, there was no development. Socrates said himself, there is no development. You can't learn anything new. Everything is finished. Everything is ready. This is death to knowledge. It's like saying, you can't learn anything. Everything is finished. You might go back to bed again and snooze. There is a way out of this. The third dimension into this, I would say, is when you take it further, and that is to show the different instances we already covered, and people will start asking for extra proof when they got the first glimpse of dry land, but before they are safe enough to navigate their own vessel. That's when they need extra help. We covered so many areas. We covered what is in case theory, fractals, Mandelbrot set. We covered Alexander technique that shows that you need to take in reality to be functioning properly. We showed in biology like Maturana and Varela, Francisco Varela, Umberto Maturana, the two Chilean biologists, that shows that inside and outside is the same thing, and it's a very big step, like eradicating the foundations for dualism, which is important as well as an argument, like a proof. Other thing is Damasio. He showed very clearly that you cannot separate something rational from something that is not rational. That separation is impossible. It's very akin to the separation between numbers and meaning, or objects and where they're situated in the world. But also from the philosophers, the helpful ones, like Heidegger, that shows that the world is, he almost uses the same term as David Bohm and David F. Peat, that reality is uncovering and covering, and in this movement is what here you find reality. Reality is this movement in between these two. In between the two different looks at the ambigram, there is a movement. And even everything is stable and static, there is still a movement. Nothing have to be moved at all for you to see the movement, realize the movement, observe the movement in the ambigram. And that goes to show that there is a movement that is beyond seeing, and that is the more fundamental movement. Nothing is moving in the normal way. I'm not moving my eyes, nothing is moving out there, but there's still a movement in between the rabbit and the duck and all the other stuff. It could be 3, could be 4, could be 5, could be how many, I don't know. That's the fundamental movement. And that's why I think it's so good to have the ambigram, because it actually shows the hollow movement. Another person that has been quite helpful is, of course, Ludwig Wittgenstein. And I think he's a very good example, because he was also lost at sea, completely lost. And he wanted to enforce a division in reality that was so strict, nobody had done anything stricter. But he had to pay for this misunderstanding gravely in his life. He hurt people around him. He didn't make his fortune, neither in love nor in marriage, not anything. And he came to realize that it was a better way. And he tried to help people catch a glimpse of dry land by showing, for instance, in his language games, that words, objects, reality are not as clear-cut, differentiated as people think. He actually calls the book a ladder. You use the ladder to get up, and then you don't need the ladder, you can leave it behind. The Lighthouse is a bit similar. They lead the people to the land, and once they find land, they can navigate the last bit by themselves, and they are safe in reality. They're going to be grounded. They're going to stand groundedly and have all the air above them, around them, so they can be both static and movable. The width that we have now is just incredible. It's, apart from Heidegger and Wittgenstein, we have, of course, our dear Derrida. And we have De Bono, who was so insightful, and he was completely outside the academics, which makes him a completely other perspective. And that can help us, can also help the vanligt folk, the common man. And we have mentioned Alexander technique, and that makes a helpful thing. You need to take your embodiment into considerations, because we molded our body to fit the idea of a subject object partitioning that is static, that doesn't have any other possibilities. It's almost like that there would be other possibilities is like completely unheard of. It is completely unheard of. And it would also be a priori impossible. And I think this is one of the strongest things that keeps people lost at sea, because it's impossible even to fathom. And we need to come in to help that. And I think both the people in this third partitioning and what I will mention in the fourth, which I'm coming to now, is that we need to show sort of paradoxes in real life, in space, in time, that shows there is problems, there's a glitch, there is a cat that's turning up twice, same cat, without an explanation. And of course, here we have the thing with the scale from Julian Barber, who shows very eloquently, very clearly, that scale cannot exist in the universe. It doesn't even make sense. It's worse than wrong. It's sensible. And therefore, it sort of softens up the idea of absolute difference in scale and size. Because that's one of the things that imprison us, that's the word in English, that puts us in the prison when we think everything is derived from the little to the big. And it cannot be the opposite. That's a sure lock for the body, for the mind. Another one in space is inside, outside. And here, of course, the Klein bottle came as a magical tool to show inside and outside in real space, in reality, is both different, completely different, but also exactly the same thing. The Klein bottle has only one flat surface, but it also has volume. How weird can it be? Well, that's real space for you. And real space is more encompassing. And on top of that, we already have that knowledge somewhere within our systems. And this is also a help. Something I would like to take up in this partition 4. And that's, we all have some sort of knowledge of this. Because we are in the world. We've been in the world for quite a while. I've been here for 55 years. That's a heck a lot of knowledge that need to be addressed, opened up, awakened. And this leads me to a third tool here that could goes to help even more, to sort of boost the whole thing. Ian McGilchrist goes to show that how does the left hemisphere works? Well, it works in similar way as classical physics. They go hand in hand. And what the left hemisphere introduced is a catch-22. And that catch-22 need to be softened up, widened. And that was the catch-22 that I mentioned in the beginning with the cat. Because I won't see that it's the same cat. I won't understand the paradox, not at heart anyway. Because the left hemisphere makes everything seem very, very familiar, known. And to show people that sensation is completely natural, but it's still very wrong. Because the left hemisphere has no connection whatsoever to reality. It's constructed not to be in reality or doing things with reality. Actually, its representations of reality is not nothing like a map or a globe or a description. It's quite different. It serves a singular, definitive, distinct purpose, and all the different aspects are indeed very different. They're completely different from each other. They're distinct. There are no similarities in between them. How come we still feel that there is a similarity, that we have a consistent and comprehensive reality? Well, it's because of the left hemisphere blocks out that perception. It actually stops it before it can even be perceived. And that's a process in the left hemisphere that when it's working fine, it's fantastic. It's more developed in human beings than any other living being, but it's gone completely out haywire, AWOC. It doesn't follow any rules anymore. So it's actually, put in another way, the left hemisphere that tells me that's not the same cat. I can see all the paradoxes just in front of me and will say still that don't make any difference. And this goes to show also the sameness. How I can say that I see distances in the world. I see distance between these two. What do I actually experience? Well, I don't experience a distance. It's a blocking out of experience. We know that the left hemisphere through capsules callosum literally blocks experience. And this is this blockage that we call distance, or depth in reality, or linear time. It's just a blockage. As you can hear, blockage is never good. And what's the consequences of the blockage? Those things we can, in a very natural way, explain in this common world. And one good example I would say is the underground system in Tokyo. We know that would never work with linear time. The very minute, discrete working needs a wholeness. It's a whole system. It's a partial system and it's a whole system. And we need the both to make it work. But if we only have the partial, we'll never be able to have a whole system working to that degree. It's completely out of the question. Will never work. We need to be in proper time, in real time. Very good example. That could waken some people who wants their buses to come on time or their trains. It's a natural effect of too much Newtonian time. It will not help us to be on time. And although it will help us more to be in time than we had before, there is a better way of doing it. And this is the very smart move that Julian Barber made. And it goes to show that we don't need time, we don't need space, not in the Newtonian classical way. We could do all of classical physics with what Julian Barber and Bertotti developed. They take classical time out of the equation. We don't need it. And they took space out as well. Those two things are unnecessary. We can still make all the bridges work in the world. We can all buildings, cars, everything, spaceships, all that can work. It will be vastly more complicated to calculate. Yes, it doesn't matter. Soon as there is an alternative, that will show people, well, let me think about. Maybe what I perceive as time is not fundamental. Something else is more fundamental. How could something that has an alternative be fundamental? I cannot. Soon as there's an alternative, it couldn't be fundamental anymore. Because this works halfway like a paradox. And I call that alternative. And this is for the fourth petition. Show alternatives to classical physics. Better ones. They have to be better ones. Because we're fed up with not being able to plan our future or be on time. Or we're completely bored with reality. Look at this. This is a beauty I can't perceive because of classical physics. We have an internal desperate need of something better, more encompassing, more spectacular. And I think this is the way to show people the way out of the stormy winds of being completely lost at sea. And I really hope you can see the whole of my partition body here. But I'm very, very happy for this first good move into that direction. Hooray for the ambigram channel. Thank you very much for me. Bye bye.